Welcome back to another video. In this one I'm going to be carrying on working on the ceiling of the camper van, getting the lights in and getting it painted. So the first thing you can see me doing here is cutting the strips that are going to be the cladding pieces. These are both going to be decorative and these are going to be what the lights fit in between. So I've got LED strip lights and these are going to fit in between two strips of plywood. So I'm getting the plywood cut just using the mini circular saw with a guide on, cutting them to about 100mm and then cutting them to length. There's going to be one joint in the middle that's just getting filled and then obviously painted over. Once these were all cut to size, I took these into the van and then just measured out, deciding on the position of these. They were fixed in place using expanding foam as a glue and some screws just to hold them in place. Once the first one was in place, I then just used a spacer that was the same width as the lights. You can see me here checking it just to make sure the lights are still fitting, just to position the next one and then fitted the second one alongside. Once these were in and glued, I just filled the screw holes just using car body filler and then sanded these down ready to paint. Once these were all sanded, it was time to get the paint on the ceiling. Now I went for a dark coloured ceiling, which is a bit different to what a lot of people do. Normally your standard is a white ceiling, but because I was doing the walls white, I didn't want it to just be a white box. It's a paint called Deep Space Echo by Valspar, and it's actually the leftover paint that we have from our stairs and landing. Once it was all painted, it was time to get the trim on for the roof light. The trim as was just had your standard screw holes and I wanted these to be countersunk, so I just used a countersink bit just to countersink the screws in, just so they were nice and flush, just so they looked a bit better and a bit more professional than having your screws sticking out. Once the screws were countersunk, it was time to fix the trim into the plywood. I decided just to screw this rather than gluing it as well, just in case in future this fan either gets changed or you need access up into the space above. And then finally it was time to put the light strips in. So what I did here, which was actually quite difficult because the nozzle of the sealant gun didn't fit into the holes very well, so you can see I was struggling slightly here. But I basically just used a sealant adhesive, put this into the gap, and then I pressed the light strips into place. Once the lights were all in place, I just wiped any sealant adhesive that had come out and got onto the ceiling just with a wonder wipe. The ceiling's going to get touched up anyway, just because it's got a few marks on since doing this, just from the build process really. The LED light strips that I decided to use for this have remote controls with them, so I think we've got about 4 different remotes. I decided against using light switches because I thought this was just a little bit easier, because wherever you are in the van you can have the remote and you can turn it on. It also means if you go out you can take a remote with you, and when you get back you can just turn it on from the outside rather than having to find your light switch and turn it on that way. It means you can have one next to your bed, you can have one at the front, and you can have one in the cab. It just makes it a little bit easier than having light switches dotted around the place, and it obviously keeps it a nice clean look. So that's the lights all installed. The next video is going to be covering the cabinet and the bed builds. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that one. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.